It's the Remy Martin Bowl. How does Kansas find a way to beat Arizona State and start building some momentum? We preview the game on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here at D Johnson Radio on Twitter. You can find the show, Locked On Jayhawks, anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every show. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. We are going to be breaking down a preview of Kansas versus Arizona State, the Remy Martin Bowl, and we're going to get into headlines for the game, Arizona State scouting report, matchups to watch, and players to watch on today's episode of the show, which is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So Kansas takes on Arizona State, Wednesday night action, 7 o'clock Central Time in Allen Fieldhouse. And I mentioned this is the Remy Martin Bowl. Well, that's the last time that these two teams met in Allen Fieldhouse. It was when Remy Martin came in, and at that point, I think Remy might have been a freshman, and I want to say it was like Trey Holder and a couple of the other guards. It was a really good guard team from Arizona State. They started the season so hot, and then they kind of finished slow, but made the NCAA tournament, and they won at Kansas, and that was the 2018 Kansas team that ended up making the Final Four, but lost, I think, 3 times at home that season. Then you look at the other part of the home and home, which was your most recent meeting. It was the game in Tempe, and that was the team with Dedrick Lawson, where they kind of let it go late. They didn't have a great close to the game, and Arizona State did have a good close to the game, and Kansas lost on the road. So as part of that most recent home and home, when you did play about half a decade ago, they won both of those. Now, I believe for the overall series, Arizona State is up 6-5 in the overall series on KU's website. The most recent Kansas win, which was the most recent matchup before that home and home, would have been the 2003 NCAA tournament, in which Kansas obviously wound up making it all the way to the national title game with Nick Collison and Kirk Heinrich and the bunch. So if you beat Arizona State, clearly you're going to at least the Final Four. That's what past history would tell us. But if you lose to Arizona State, like you did in 2018 at home, then you're also going to the Final Four. So Kansas is golden. They're just playing Arizona State. Everything is good. Don't worry about anything else. But in the real, like, this is a big game for Kansas to try to build some momentum, right? You come off a really strong performance at UCF. You know, it's one thing to win at UCF. You're expected to do so, albeit, you know, for Kansas, they had really been struggling on the road coming into that over this season and last year. So you don't take that for granted. But, you know, it's one thing to win on the road. It's another to win by 51 points. And it's another to look dominant. And for Kansas, a team that has struggled in some of these recent games, you know, it was important to go out like that. But how do you capitalize on that momentum? Because it's one thing if you're having a step forward and then you take another step back, and then it's just like erased what you did. Can you capitalize on that momentum, especially with a big road trip upcoming at Cincinnati and at Iowa State in your next 2 games? So build some momentum. Can you keep playing pissed off, so to speak? Like, that's something that Bill Self said after they beat UCF. He said, that's a team that played angry, played pissed off. Like, can you continue to do that each and every game? If you can, all right, if you can bring that energy level up, then I think this team has enough talent to make some stuff happen. But they're not, I don't know that any team is, but certainly you're not talented enough to, if you're going to play lethargic, to overcome early holes in some of these games like you've had against Missouri and against West Virginia. Then the other headline coming into this one is going to be returning late after the snow and ice storm. Like, is that going to hurt at all? Or could it help? Could it help if you were all huddled up in a hotel together for an extra day? Could it help with team bonding and, you know, from the chemistry perspective of the game? So we'll wait and see on that one as they get ready for Arizona State. Now, the opponent scouting report here, Arizona State is 10-3 on the season. They're 1-1 in the Big 12. A lot of top 100 wins so far to this point of the year. Grand Canyon, I believe that was without Tyon Grant Foster at the time, but still a top 100 win. Santa Clara, who's low-key like a really good WCC school this year. New Mexico, who, you know, was a tournament team last year, and we'll see how it goes this year, but I think very well could be a tournament team again this year. St. Mary's, who, you know, typically is a tournament team. And then most recently, they got their first Big 12 win, beating Colorado 81-61. Now, when you look at it, though, as many top 100 wins as they are, there's not many, like, super, I guess if you were viewing it from the net perspective, like quad one wins. Like the St. Mary's win, they're ranked 45th on KenPom, but everybody else is between 50 and 100. So quality wins, but when you're playing Kansas, you would have to have that elite win, and that's what they're going to be going for in this one. Now, the best opponents that Arizona State has played, they had a 20-point loss to BYU on the road. BYU is a solid team, top 40-ish team, but again, not viewed as like a top 15 team or anything like that. Florida certainly is viewed as a top 10, 15 team in the country, and they lost by 17 to them. And then they had an 8-point loss to a top 10 Gonzaga team. If you want to count the exhibition game that certainly popped some people's eyeballs, they lost by like infinity points to Duke. But I probably shouldn't count that because I don't want to count KU's exhibition game either, where they got blown out by Arkansas. So let's not count theirs. We don't have to worry about counting KU's either. Overall, this is a team that is ranked top 60 on KenPom. They're just outside the top 60 on Bart Torvik. They're ranked top 55 in the net rankings. They come in barely inside the top 100 offensively, and then KenPom gives them a top 35 defense. So this is a quality opponent, but it's also, you might not fully know what these teams are till you get in the thick of conference play. And we just saw, Kansas lose to West Virginia, who was ranked around here at home, but West Virginia, since then, they get that win. They blow out Oklahoma State. Like, West Virginia looks like they are going to be better than that ranking was. You look at the personnel for Arizona State. They've got a former local kid, Blue Valley Northwest player in Alston Mason, who began his career at Oklahoma, went to Missouri State, had a good year last year, transferred to Arizona State, and he's one of 4 players for the Sun Devils, averaging between 11 and 14 points per game. He's at 11 points, 34% from 3. He can shoot it from deep, 3.5 assists per game. Then they have another multi-time transfer in Adam Miller, who's 6'3", 9.6 points per game, scorching 48% from 3 as the 2 guard. They've got a 6'5" freshman in, I don't know how to pronounce it, Josan Sanan. I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce that. He plays the 2 and the 3. He's had a great first year so far. 13.5 points per game, tied for the team lead on 48% from 3. So you see that between Sanan and Miller, that's 108 3-pointers attempted at a 48% clip. So you got to get out on shooters in this game for Kansas, specifically those 2. Then there's BJ Freeman. He's a 6'6" wing. He was actually on the Kansas portal radar this past offseason. He's averaging close to 12 points, over 4 rebounds, just under 3 assists per game. Not super high shooting efficiency, but not like bad either. 6'8" wing Amir Ali will play, but the main 2 guys who will play at the 4 and 5 is a former very highly touted recruit in Jaden Quaintance. He's a 6'9" big man who's averaging 9.4 points, 8.2 rebounds per game with 1.5 steals, over 3 blocks per game, and he's shooting 52% from the floor. Now, he is shooting really low from 3-point percentage, but he can shoot them. He has been just an absolute stud so far. He's, I would say, pretty interchangeable whether they play him at the 4 or 5. Same goes for their other 4-5 man in Bashir Jihad. I think you would maybe technically count Quaintance more as the 4, whereas Jihad maybe you would count more as the 5. But again, they feel pretty interchangeable to me. And Jihad is 6'9", 240 pounds. He leads the team at 13.5 points per game to go along with 5.5 rebounds per game. And he's shooting 39% from 3, which allows those kind of 2 big men to play together in addition to the defense, in addition to Quaintance's athleticism. Now, one thing to keep in mind with Jihad, he has a very high turnover number. So we'll see if Kansas can take advantage of that in this game. They do have one 7-footer who rotates in. He plays close to 13 minutes per game. Sean Phillips gives them some size, solid rebounder, but he'll just be in as kind of a body to defend Hunter Dickinson for here and there throughout the game. What I think is interesting here is they're basically playing 2 bigs, right? If you look at both Quaintance and Jihad, that's 2 6'9" kind of big men who you're playing, but both bigs can at least shoot it a little bit, more so certainly in the case of Jihad, and are athletic, more so in the case of Quaintance, and they surround it with guards who really let it fly. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that does against what Kansas wants to do. Now, when you look at what they do well, Arizona State gets to the free throw line at a very solid rate. They're an excellent 3-point shooting team. They're shooting 37.6%. That is top 40 nationally, and that comes on pretty high volume. On the defensive end, they're really good at avoiding sending you to the free throw line. They block a ton of shots, which leads to an above average 2-point defense. And so far, they're holding opponents under 30% from 3. But with the volume allowed, that might be a little bit lucky. I don't know. We'll wait and see how that stuff balances out over the course of the season. Where they've struggled so far this season, Arizona State does turn the ball over at a below average national rate. They're a bad offensive rebounding team. So They're not a great possession team, I guess you would say. They get the ball stolen a lot. They get it blocked from them a lot. That leads to not being one of the better 2-point offenses you're going to see, right? They really rely on being able to shoot threes well. The good news is they do shoot threes well. And then defensively, they don't really get steals on that end either. So again, they're not really winning the possession game, but they still can't hurt you because they've got an ultimate stud on the inside and young freshman and Jaden Quaintance, and they've got a bunch of 3-point shooters on the outside, and that is what would certainly scare me the most coming into this matchup. All right, let's get into the matchups of the game that could decide it. Players to watch. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode of the show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happens to a lot of people. You might have a few subscriptions that you didn't even realize you were paying for. And Rocket Money can make it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, whether it's your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. One of the best features is the subscription tracker, in my opinion. You can use it to cancel services that you're not using anymore and can help you save a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, you can set aside money automatically for your future where you don't have to stress about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That is rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Continuing on with this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, thanks for making it your first listen every day. Don't forget to check out Locked On College Football, Locked On College Basketball. We got Locked On Big 12 going on for your second listen every day as well. We will have a KU Arizona State recap after the game occurs, so stick around for that one too. And then later this week, we'll get you a preview of Kansas against Cincinnati going on the road for the Jayhawks, looking to win 2 straight on the road, dare I say. Okay, matchups of the game for this one, Kansas, Arizona State. Number 1, scoring inside for KU. So among the 4 teams who have had an effective field goal percentage of 55% or higher against Arizona State this year, and for what it's worth, everyone else has been at 51 or below, so it's been like a big jump to what most teams have done against Arizona State and then to what those top 4 have done. Arizona State's only 1-3. Right. And it makes sense if you're giving up easier baskets or the other team shooting well, like you're probably going to lose more of those games. But all 3 of their losses have come that way. And even the one win where you're sitting, okay, what was the one win in the 1-3? It was a 4-point victory, barely one game over a bad Cal Poly team. So if you can score efficiently, you're probably going to win this game. And I think what adds to the intrigue here is those 3 teams who beat them that had effective field goal percentages of 55% or higher. Collectively, those 3 teams that beat them were 28 of 86 from 3-point range. So that's 32.6%. So this was not something where Arizona State lost those games because the other teams were just shooting bonkers from 3 or something, or that's why the effective field goal percentage was super high. It wasn't. Like, all those teams shot average-ish from 3. The reason they shot well overall was 2-point offense, of which all 3 of those losses shot at least 59.5% or better on 2-point shots. So if you can score on the inside against Arizona State, you can win the game. Obviously easier said than done because you have a team who has a guy who averages over 3 blocks per game in Jaden Quaintance, right? Overall, Arizona State, 93rd percentile nationally in block rate, right? So it's easier said than done, but Kansas does this well. They're 90th nationally, or 90th percentile nationally, in at the rim percentage, right? Kansas is one of the best teams in the country in finishing at the rim. And that's something where if they get the opportunities, they will. But the problem is, what happens if Arizona State stacks the paint? What is that going to do to the KU game plan? What if they take the guy off KJ Adams like we saw with the Creighton game, like we saw with the Missouri game, like we saw with the West Virginia game, and they say, no, we're just going to pack the paint and you're not going to be allowed to do that, right? I think it'll be interesting, and Arizona State does give up a lot of floaters and push shots and short mid-range shots, and we've seen Kansas take a good amount of those, so maybe that is cycling into something that would be bad for KU because those typically end up being, lower efficiency shots, so to speak. But maybe that just means it comes down to how well DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams are hitting those shots, because they're the ones who take, I would say, a majority of those. And if the game is coming down to that happening, I don't know how comfortable KU fans would feel, but we have seen them be able to have games where, they have made them all. So it'll be interesting. But then again, in Big 12 games, Arizona State did allow Colorado and BYU to shoot a combined 33 of 46. That's 72% at the rim. But again, if they just sag off KJ, then it's more complicated than just that. Either way, Kansas has to win by getting easy buckets. I think that's the avenue to both something that Kansas wants to do, something that has led to Arizona State losses, and we'll see how they go about it in this game plan based on how Arizona State defends them. Number 2, beat Arizona State down the floor. Arizona State has not been a good transition defensive team so far. So far this season, Arizona State is giving up over 11 transition points per game. In fact, they rank in just the 10th percentile nationally. What that means, 90% of college basketball. There's like a billion teams in college basketball. 90% of college basketball is giving up less percentage of points they allow coming via transition than Arizona State. That's great news for KU, who is a good transition team. 84th percentile nationally for KU and almost 13 transition points per game. And I think interesting numbers here. I was taking a look, like, who is getting the transition points for KU? Well, there's 2 players tied for the lead on Kansas in transition 2-point attempts. That'd be DeJuan Harris and AJ Storr. Both of them have attempted 18 transition 2s. DeJuan Harris is 15 of 18 on transition 2s, which I think speaks more to, like, DeJuan will take the open layup, but he's not going to force it. He'll pass off, give somebody a good option, or he'll run the offense, right? With AJ Storr, it makes sense. He has a lot of 2s, because to me, that is what I view as the best part of his game, that he can be this downhill attacking, scoring wing, and that works well in transition. He's 11 of 18 in transition, so that's a good number too, like over 60%. In terms of transition 3s, the leader for KU is Zeke Mayo. He's attempted 14 of them, which everybody else on Kansas combined has attempted 16 of them, and 9 of those are from Ryland Griffin. But basically, that means Zeke Mayo is taking like all of your transition 3s, or basically a coin flip, whether it's him or somebody else, and he's made them at 36%. So that's a solid number. So maybe keep an eye on those guys in this game. All right, number 3 for our matchups here is guarding the 3-point line. There is literally one area, that's it, one area on the heat map when you're talking about at the rim, in the paint, mid-range, corner 3s, and above the break 3s. Of those 5, only one area on the heat map that Arizona State shoots shots at more than a national average amount, and that is the above the break 3s. They take a top 20 rate nationally. Corner 3s at the rim, mid-range, in the paint, all of those are below the 50th percentile nationally in the amount of basically their shots they're getting up from there, which means they are heavily reliant on above the break 3s. So can you guard them if you're KU? Can you prevent those shots from going in at an efficient level? Can you keep them to low 30% on 3-point shots, specifically from those above the break 3s? And what I think is interesting here, going back to the last game, Flory Bidunga was so good against UCF, and even the game before in the second half against West Virginia, Flory Bidunga's ability on the defensive end of the court. Are you able to, by having Flory in there, having his defense where he has shown the ability to guard guards and he can fly around there with a reckless abandon, and he has all this length and athleticism, in a weird way, it's almost counterintuitive. You would think playing a 2-big lineup, a 2-center lineup with Flory and Hunter, or with Flory and KJ, would be bad for guarding 3-point defenses. But by playing an extra center in Flory, I feel like it helps their 3-point defense, because it is this guy who can run around and chase guards and can, make you think twice if you're shooting a 3, like, oh no, this 6'9" dude who runs super fast is coming at me to try to block this shot. Or at the very least, if you have Flory on the inside, it gives those guards on the outside for KU peace of mind that, hey, if I let this guy get behind me, I got Flory back there to wipe it away. And now I can really contain this guy from shooting the 3, because I'm more content with him driving past me, right? So I think that'll be interesting in how that affects that in all this. But interestingly enough, Kansas gives up above the break 3s at a rate about 5% lower than the national average. It's a good chunk. So the hard hedges that they've been doing, if you've noticed, KU's been doing a lot of stuff where they run a high ball screen, they have Hunter Dickinson run out, and they're basically doubling the ball handler off the ball screen with these hard hedges. And that a lot of times takes away some of those above the break 3s, at least off that initial ball screen, because it's not just a situation where the defender is going under the screen and that player is going to shoot the 3. Now, they can still get above the break 3s off the pass or from the wings and the slot area and that sort of thing. But I find that very interesting, because it's You've seen Kansas give up some easy layups, like you think of the West Virginia game, because of the way they've defended that. But does it help with above the break threes? And does it help in a matchup like this? I think we're going to certainly find out that. All right, let's finish up here. Who are the players to watch for Kansas, Arizona State? This is Locked On Jayhawks. All right, so Kansas takes on Arizona State, trying to win their second straight Big 12 game. Our player matchup of the game, we're going to go with Hunter Dickinson versus, kind of cheated here, Quainton / Jihad, the two big men for Arizona State. I'm not entirely certain who they're going to have guard Hunter, right? You could say with Jihad, maybe he's, just from a strength perspective, like maybe it makes more sense, but Quainton's is a better shot blocker, and he's this stud freshman, like maybe you have him on him. I'll be very interested to see who they have match up with him individually. And then you have the crux in all this, what we kind of talked about earlier, like, is Arizona State gonna take a page from some of the teams who have given Kansas trouble and just say, we're not going to guard KJ Adams unless he's within 5 feet of the paint, and we're going to use that extra defender as a shot blocker to help double Hunter Dickinson, to block shots from other players driving into the paint. And if that's the role they're asking to do, then it makes most sense for Quaintance to be that guy, because then Quaintance, who is their best shot blocker, can just be roaming on the inside, causing havoc for the KU offense. So it'll be very interesting to me how that plays into it all. But on its own, you could argue that Quaintance is Arizona State's best player. I know he's not leading them in scoring, but he is in rebounding, is in block shots. He's just a very dynamic player. And Hunter Dickinson's such a productive player for KU. So I think that should be just fun, kind of having them around each other on the inside. At the same point in time, Hunter does have, like a 5-inch advantage on these guys. And can he just bury them in the post? And then on the other end, Quaintance' athleticism or Jihad's ability to shoot threes at near a 40% clip, are those going to cause Hunter Dickinson all sorts of troubles on the defensive end of the floor? So I think this is going to be a very interesting game, but also one that I think it does make sense to use even more of the Flory Hunter big men lineups based on how Arizona State is playing. And I hope we get to see a lot of that in this game for KU, which, by the way, sounds like Shaquille Moore will be starting for the second straight game. So we'll see if that helps with KU's three-point defense as well. High on the go-off meter for KU, we're going to go with Zeke Mayo. We went with Zeke last game against UCF, and it didn't work out. He went 3 of 10 for 7 points. And like everybody went off for KU, but it wasn't really his shooting game. And that was kind of the beauty of Zeke Mayo, though, that he still found a way to be like, you know what? There's these other players going off. Like, I don't need to go off. Like, I'm just going to end up with 7 assists or something like that instead. And he still had a good game out of it. But I think in this one, Arizona State's bigs are really impactful on the defensive end of the court. It's not that I think their guards are necessarily like bad defenders, but I don't think they're elite defenders necessarily. And when you look at some of the high scores of teams they've most recently played, like for instance, against BYU, Richie Saunders, who's like a 6'5" guard wing type, he had 30 points against them. And you look at it in it's been some times where kind of the wing 2-3 guard types are scoring good totals against Arizona State. Well, now you look at Mayo, and basically in this lineup with DeJuan Harris and Shaquille Moore, as I knock my microphone out, it's basically he's the 3 in that lineup if you view it from that standpoint on offense. And plus, adding to it, the Mayo did have a down shooting game. So I just always feel like when you have a good shooter, if they have a down shooting game, I feel like they're going to come back and bounce back in that way. And he has been awesome at home. The home road splits for Zeke Mayo are very apparent. Right now in Allen Fieldhouse, Zeke Mayo is shooting 38% from 3. On the road, Zeke Mayo is only shooting 27% from 3. At home, Zeke Mayo is averaging 16.4 points per game. On the road, Zeke Mayo is averaging 8.5 points per game. Well, guess what? This game's at home, so I think Zeke Mayo goes off. Plus, we talked earlier, transition opportunities. Zeke Mayo takes the most transition threes on KU, an area they should be able to score. So I'm going to say a big game for Zeke for a lot of different reasons there. That'll do it for this episode of the show, though, with Locked On Jayhawks. Make sure to subscribe anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. And we will be back for a Kansas-Arizona State recap. We'll also get you ready for the weekend with Kansas-Cincinnati later in the week. So make sure to subscribe anywhere you get your podcast right here with LOJ. See you next time.